when I got into Celebrate Recovery, I was chemical dependency leader, so I had to start talking about my past, and it was hard. I mean, I would time I mentioned, I'd be in the room, I'd be crying, but
But you felt like you found a safe place.
found a safe place. But then I got into the VA, and I got into a program called long-term exposure treatment,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to go through what happened in that village, and it was hard. It was
Yeah.
very hard. I mean, when they would ask me to talk, all I could do was cry.
Mm-hmm.
They after I completed the program, they told me that they only gave me a 50-50 chance that I was going to commit suicide. And after the first session, they said he'll never be back, because most people quit. But I think, being in Celebrate Recovery, you learn that the only way you're going to conquer these problems is you got to come back and tell your story. And I think that's the most valuable thing that I learned.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for another episode of At Home with Emily, a podcast about creating a life you love. I'm your host, Emily Wood, and all this month we have a 4-part series about second chances, all different types of stories and people's journeys, and when they got that second chance and what it meant to them in their life. And joining me today is Bob Gannon. He is a Vietnam veteran, served in Vietnam and came home back to the States. And we say that so quickly in one sentence, but what you went through in those few years of life, I know was so challenging. So, Bob, thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
It means a lot to me. And after I asked you to come on, thinking that you were local to Springfield, I found out you were going to be driving down here. So it's extra special. Thank you for coming all this way. And before we get started too, I just want to thank you for your service, because I know that we don't always remember to do that, and we're grateful for you. So you grew up in a town of 99 people, right?
99 people.
Argyle, Missouri.
Dirt roads.
And traveled a long way from there. But you alluded to me that childhood wasn't the easiest for you.
No. I grew up my dad was a very abusive alcoholic. My mom was just a bitter person.
Yeah.
And when I started school, we just had a 2-room schoolhouse,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think the teachers probably had much more than a high school education. So I had dyslexia, and they didn't know it. And so they automatically considered me dumb. I remember to this day, teacher told my mom in front of me that I was so dumb that I wouldn't amount to nothing in life, much more than a ditch digger. And then, it was a Catholic town, and all the boys served Mass, but they said I was too dumb, to serve Mass. So
And we're talking 70 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And you remember that feeling that gave you as a child.
What you do, when that feeling as a child goes deep.
Yeah.
Very, when you criticize a child, that feeling, I still feel it to this day.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably how you started to think of yourself, because that's what you were told.
Oh yeah, I had no hope. I got mad at God, why you done this to me? How come I don't have the same opportunity as others? Why I'm not smart? The embarrassment of spelling bee, the first one always to sit down or tell you write something on a blackboard and you can't spell,
Mm-hmm.
You better be able to know how to fight, because you're going to be made fun of. And that's how you grow up. You become bitter and angry, and, you have no hope.
And so when you left Argyle and you joined the Marines, did you enlist or were you drafted?
No, I enlisted. I I never could work in a factory, and that's all there was. And for somebody like me, there was no hope to go to college. And so I decided to go in the Marine Corps, and I thought that would be a home. That would be a home, and I would have something to be proud of, in my life. I could serve my country, and that's why I plan to just build a career. I never thought I'd make much rank because I thought I was too dumb, but I thought at least I'll have a home.
And what was that like? Did you find a family and a home there when you first enlisted?
Yeah, it was hard. So, the first accomplishment in my life was getting out of boot camp. It was hard, and then, you're a Marine, and that was my, I think, first accomplishment in life.
Yeah. And so you did have something to be proud of
Yep.
there. And you made friends, and there was a camaraderie there. So the time came that you were deployed to Vietnam. And you were actually behind enemy lines.
Yeah, I became a Recon Marine. I can see God's guiding my life. I had no intention of becoming a Recon Marine, but I was selected because I swam on a team in the Philippines, and I was a training NCO, so I knew all the answers on the test. And I made a 98. So, and Recon is only 1% are even chosen in the Home Marine Corps to go through that training, and half of that percent make it. It's the most brutal 3 months you'll ever face in your life, and once I got through that, I was a changed person. Nobody was ever going to slow me down again. Nobody's ever going to. If I had a dream, I was going to accomplish it. So
your perspective and your mental toughness, you feel like, came from that process.
Oh, I think so. Yeah, as a child, we grew up, milking cows in the morning, sub-zero weather. So yeah, you was used to pain. You used to dealing with it. So yeah,
you had done hard things,
right?
And in a way, the hardships of what you had been through in your childhood prepared you for that.
I think so. I think you're exactly right, because I think when you've been so low in life and you're given an opportunity to be something, that you just are not going to quit. You just push harder and harder, because this is one chance in life that you got to, to stand out.
Yeah. But then you find yourself in one of the most difficult combat situations imaginable.
Yeah, I had 35 missions behind enemy lines, and one of the great tragedies that happened to me is a lot of our missions as a Recon Marine was a watch for enemy activity around local villages.
Watch for enemy activity?
Yeah,
I see.
See how much, they're there. And so we're watching this one village, and about 20 Viet Cong came out training in a rice paddy, and I decided to call artillery on them. And normally I found this fire spotter round, and then correct off of that. But I knew if I fired the one round, they would run. So I decided to call fire for effect. I think we had 16 guns firing. The rounds fell short. They hit the village, and before we could get the artillery stopped, they fired another volley, and I'll never forget. I'm praying, for God's sake, don't let these rounds hit the village. And another 16 rounds at the village, and all night long, there was fires and people crying and screaming, and we spent 2 days there because the Viet Cong were all around us. We couldn't get out, and we watched them the next day carrying the bodies to the cemetery, and that was a nightmare. That almost took me to suicide.
And looking back now, you know that you were a young man and you did the best that you possibly could I know it's still hard to say, could I have prevented that in some way? And you've had to live decades with those thoughts. And those are thoughts that many of us will never understand. And so I just want you to know that you are cared for and appreciated. And I am sorry for what you went through. Trying to come back from that, I know there weren't a lot of resources at that time for...
There was none.
Yeah, basically none. Not a lot, none. There was nothing for you to help you when you came back. And all of a sudden, here you are back home and trying to do everyday life with all of us. What was that like for you?
Well, when I got out, of course, I had another tragedy in Vietnam. I was a platoon sergeant, and when I got injured, I was in the hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, and I found out that the day after I got injured, my platoon got ambushed and pretty well wiped out.
So you lost
now I have
everybody.
Survivor guilt on top of that. So when I got out, I decided to go to school. I went to Lynn Technical College. I took the test. I flunked it. I tested a sixth grade education, but they let me, took electronics, but they accepted me, I think, because I was a veteran, and so I just worked. I mean, I cut cordwood to put myself through school, and I just graduated 3 years later with 2 associate's degrees. Got a job on a pipeline, and I coped just by becoming a workaholic.
Just worked all the time.
Worked all the time, and when I wasn't working, I was drinking. I was just drinking, and when you do that, that leads to a lot of trouble.
Just to try to numb the thoughts, or
numb the thoughts, and then you wind up in bars, and then you're gonna have affairs. You just.
Did you have a family at that time?
Yeah.
You were able to start a family when you came back.
I had a family, but I wound up, on my own fault, getting divorced. On kind of my, it was all my fault. I just could not stand to not, be drinking, or, the thoughts would, the nightmares would in the daytime flashbacks with the screams of villages and the thoughts of how many children were killed and wounded, just would just be amplified.
And now we know it as PTSD,
yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's help out there now, not enough. But for you turned to alcohol, you said, and work. You lost your family, and you're seeing your life is not what you want it to be.
No.
Where was the point for you where you realized you needed help?
When I retired, or I got close to retirement, and is when I really fell apart. Because now I wasn't working, all the time and traveling, and the flashbacks of what happened to the village, and even though I wasn't there when my platoon got ambushed, I knew what it was like, and I would hear the screams and the shouts and the cries of the men being hit and dying, and they would just go on, and I was just on the verge of committing suicide. I couldn't go to a store no more. I couldn't go into Lowe's. If I heard a baby cry or scream, the flashbacks would start. So you just kind of isolate yourself from the world, and you just and when you do that, you just get deeper and deeper. It gets worse and worse, and the flashbacks get worse and worse.
So things started to get very dark for you.
I was at the point that I think I'd rather have passed on at that point, because I had no relief. Couldn't sleep. sleeping maybe 2 hours a night. Went on for years like that.
How many years?
Oh, probably 15, 20 years after
Wow.
I came back from the war.
Mm-hmm. And so what was the turning point for you?
I always liked to do ministries, and I was doing a jail ministry in Mount Vernon. And then Les Palmer, I met him. I really don't know how I met Les. It was a long
I know
ago.
Les. Les has a way
Yeah.
of finding people.
Talked me into coming to Celebrate Recovery. And nobody had ever knew what happened to me in Vietnam. I don't even think my kids knew I was Recon Marine.
It's not something you talked about.
No.
Never talked about it.
Right. And so when I got into Celebrate Recovery, I was chemical dependency leader. So I had to start talking about my past. And it was hard. I mean, time I'd mention it, I'd be in the room, I'd be crying, but
But you felt like you found a safe place.
found the safe place. But then I got into the VA, and I got in a program called long-term exposure treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to go through what happened in that village, and it was hard. It was very hard. I mean, when they would ask me to talk, all I could do was cry.
Mm-hmm.
They after I completed the program, they told me that they only gave me a 50-50 chance that I was going to commit suicide. And after the first session, they said he'll never be back, because most people quit. But I think, being in Celebrate Recovery, you learn that the only way you're going to conquer these problems is you got to come back and tell your story. And I think that's the most valuable thing that I learned. And through the next, I think it was 16 weeks, I went. And now, I speak at conferences, and I can stand up in front of conferences and tell the story and change lives and talk to veterans. It's something that was very negative. Now I'm reaching out and helping people.
There's something there about sharing your story, isn't there? Where you live with it and you isolate with it for so long, it holds this power over you.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden, when you find out that other people are struggling and they care about you too, you start getting stronger together, don't you?
Well, now your story has a purpose.
Yes.
It's not the negative purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're helping people, and now you have the wisdom that you've gained through all of these struggles that you can sit down. I can sit down with people that have dyslexia, and I can tell them exactly how they felt.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell them my story and give them hope, that, you'll never be able to spell. But, many great scientists are dyslexic. You're not dumb.
You're not dumb.
Yeah.
And the power of someone who understands, what you would have given for somebody who understood you.
Right.
As a kid.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As a young man.
I realized my potential,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that I wasn't dumb, that I was, that I could achieve in life. And so, yeah. I thank God every day for the road He's brought me, because now I'm 82, and, my story's now going to, I don't know, thousands of millions of people. And so it's something that, was the worst thing that happened to me. It turned out to be something that has changed many lives, have brought many people, give people hope, throughout the world.
By the way, the quote-unquote dumb kid who was going to be a ditch digger wrote an amazing book.
2 books now.
This is one of them.
Right.
Never Give Up. And it's not a short book. It's not just pictures. And this is your story. What was it like for you to sit down and put this book together?
It was hard. I found the lady that knew how to spell,
Yeah.
which I still can't. And so she helped me. But it was a lot of tears.
Mm-hmm.
relating, some of the stories. There's nothing gory in the book. I want to write a book that you could read to your children, but you could understand what it was like, the feelings you have, and so it starts at my childhood, and works my way up through Vietnam, and going through school and my job, and
And you worked on this with your daughter, right?
There was a lady called Linda Galbraith that I met that, and my daughter always has an input,
Well, yeah, and I've gotten to speak with her a little bit over the last couple days, and I think your family's very proud of you.
And well, I'm very proud of them. I mean, they endured these hard years with me. They wasn't easy years for them, my kids, when I was, going through them tough times.
What's the feeling like for you now, knowing that your past doesn't hold any power over you and that God has given you a second chance?
Oh, it feels good because I think they never understood the battle I was in, and to learn about the fight I had to pull myself out of that hole, and to see me, working homeless shelters, Celebrate Recovery. I've spent 20 years as chemical dependency leader because I just feel Celebrate Recovery was, where I really owe. I put my first feet on the ground, and I'm very proud of it. I know last time I spoke in May at the, being on TV, now my story. So they're part of it, And then the last time I spoke at the Marion Conference in St. Louis, we had over 800 people, there at the story. So, yeah. So, it's something that was a very negative thing at one time, and now my story is a very proud thing.
You feel a lot lighter, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Because at 82, one of these days you're going to lay on your deathbed and you're going to say, did my life count for something? And, the only thing you really own is your soul and your story. And, so, yeah, I'm glad what happened. I'm glad I got to Celebrate Recovery, and I feel blessed.
Yeah. And so how many years has it been since you feel like you've started that real second chance? God brought you home for a purpose, right? And just discovering that was hard. But how long has it been now since you've been walking in this second chance?
Probably about 22 years. I was actually close to 58 or 60 years old, I was, before I, got into Celebrate Recovery. And that's why I really realized, when you live so long in a certain plateau, it becomes normal. And that's where I realized how bad a shape I was really in. Because now I saw that, I always knew it wasn't normal, but I wasn't sure of the depth. I was like calling my kids once a year, isolated myself from the world, from my family, from everybody. And so that helped me,
Well, I'm sure grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful that you didn't give up. And as you've shared your story from childhood into the Marines and everything that you went through in that first, let's say, third of your life, I think that you probably drew on all of that to help you come out of the PTSD in a way that you could empower others. Right. Just like what you said, where they didn't give you much of a chance of coming back into that program at the VA, but you knew that you could keep going.
Right.
You had something deep in you that told you could do it.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, being a Recon Marine,
you'd been through it all.
Yeah, well, you don't quitting is something you don't do.
Don't do.
You know, and so that was kind of built in my
Mm-hmm.
in my system. So yeah, I'm grateful, and I'm grateful for the life I've had.
And you've reconnected with your family.
Oh yeah, we're very close. Yeah, it's and that's a real positive thing. You know, is that at my age to have a fractured family, and my family is they're down quite a bit. You know, they're helpful. They come down, help me on the farm, and and our relationship is still growing. You know.
What would you say to a younger version of yourself who maybe is fighting the depression or the PTSD or not seeing a lot of hope? Where can they start?
Well, I think like in my book, people that have dyslexia, I list a whole bunch of the scientists and movie stars, and most people with dyslexia are very sharp, very smart. They just can't spell, but we're out of the box thinkers. You know, I excelled in life when I got a job. And you're tougher because you have to work harder than anybody else. I think what I've read that people with dyslexia, are people that show up, are learning disabilities, and if you come from a dysfunctional home where you put down, that's tough. But I think you have to realize that that's also a blessing because if I hadn't gone through all that, what story would I have? And I think you have to look at it as God is developing your story, a story that you can help people, a story that you can change people's lives. Because if you don't know how they feel, if you haven't been in that hole, your advice probably is not very good. But if you can relate your story and your hope, there's no greater reward than that in life. It's to look back on your life and see the people that are doing good that you helped. Materialism or any material thing in life is not even close to worth any of that. And so I'm thankful for God to give me that life He gave me. I still feel bad about what happened in the war and my men, but I've learned to deal with it. I've learned to deal with it and use it as a testimony.
Absolutely.
And help veterans get through PTSD. You got to get into treatment.
Mm-hmm.
I always say once you've been a warrior for your country, now be a warrior for your family.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do what I did. Put your family through that. There's so much treatment out there today that help you.
Be a warrior for your family.
Be a warrior for your family.
Well, thank you for coming in today, and thank you for sharing with us, and for sharing your story again. And I hope that it encourages someone out there who needed to hear it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of At Home with Emily, a podcast about creating a life you love. Hey, if you are watching us on YouTube, please be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss when our next episode drops. We have a new one coming out every Wednesday. We're in the middle of a 4-part series about second chances. You don't want to miss these stories. They will no doubt inspire you. You can follow Around the Ozarks on Instagram, on X, as well as Facebook, and head to AroundTheOzarks.com and sign up for our daily newsletter. We'll see you next time.